Welcome back to Why Blank Lost. I'm David Bloomberg, and joining me as always is someone who has been saying advantages are disadvantages for a long time now. My co-host, Jessica
Mhm.
Lewis.
I was so happy to hear him admit it finally on the show, no less, not just in like the
Well,
podcast,
did he admit
on the
it
show.
or he asked? Like he was like,
Okay.
"Oh, wait, are you saying that like he's putting on this innocent face like, "Oh, I'll take that as a note." Okay, sure, Jeff.
I understand, but he
Yeah.
has acknowledged it. He
Yes.
vocalized it and he even inquired further about
Mhm.
it, which to me, that's like the first step, right? Is
Yes.
you have to admit that there's a
Oh,
problem. And
he
I think
already
he's
knew.
finally
He
but he's
already
finally made it
knew.
public.
You
He's
know, I
finally
mean,
made it public.
I he knew that this has been a disadvantage for a long time, and he likes to see people, uh, well, find find out how to get around the disadvantage.
Yeah. I will say that I appreciated the fact that there was even like a collective like, "Hey, yeah, so this thing that you had him do on the journey,
Yes,
it's not good." And Rome at least did have an opportunity to explain to Jeff why it was bad. So I
yes,
do I do very much appreciate that it is now included as part of the story of Survivor itself. It's not just something that we're podcasting about and people are tweeting about. Now it's the actual players saying, "Hey, Jeff, this is not good and this
right,
is why." So
yes.
I can appreciate that we've crossed into that
And Jeff
space.
just went,
He learned a little bit because now we kind of have a merge thing, right? I
ish.
mean, ish.
I mean, it's a merge, except that the person who doesn't make it doesn't get a buff and is still undateable, technically. Sorry, Rome.
Doesn't get to be on the jury. That's it. That's the end of it.
I
You're
will
done.
just continue. I think for most of this episode, I will just call it the merge. Um,
I
and
agree.
and I'm glad to get rid of the term mergatory because despite my
Mm,
valiant attempts and even Tiffany, who coined the term, agreeing with me, there are
yeah,
far too many people who still misspell it as mergatory. They don't have the E in there after merge. So it makes me grind my teeth every time I see it. And I know it's a made up word, but it's made
it
up
is.
in my mind with an E there. And,
Right. Spell it the
so
way that David Bloomberg has told you to
exactly.
spell it
Yeah.
because
Thank
he's
you.
right.
Because,
Yeah.
yes, yes. So now, aren't you glad that this was the way I led off instead of being like, ha ha, you lost your winner pick?
I knew we were gonna get there
Well,
eventually, so I was
obviously.
preparing myself for
Yeah.
it, and I knew that this day would unfortunately come. However, I was really hoping that what I had mentioned a few episodes back, maybe a couple, that perhaps Rome was frustrating people so much that they were willing to keep him around because no one would vote for him in the end, so he'd be in the final 3. That's what I was really kind of hoping for
Hmm.
because we've seen that happening. I think that was there was, like, themes or something, but
Right.
regardless, that didn't happen. They were done with Rome and sent
Yes,
him packing.
yes, yes. I'm sure it was fun for you to root for him while it lasted, and just
I
as you said about my winner pick, this is nothing against him. This is solely against you.
No.
So, yeah,
And I will say, I am a curse to anyone who I choose as my winner pick because you never win. I'm so very sorry. So the bag failed me. The rocks failed me as I should become accustomed to at this juncture in my life that
yes,
rock
yes.
draws don't work out well for me. So
Or
so my
Rome,
Rome rock
apparently,
will sit
because you
here.
cursed him retroactively by drawing
I
his name.
I know. This is what I'm saying. It's all terrible. That
Yes,
butterfly effect.
yes.
But
Now,
yes, I did lose my winner pick.
yeah,
Sad.
yeah. Now, an interesting thing to me is that last week we talked about Annika's very real reaction. And I think we had
Mm,
another one this week, though in a different way. Rome didn't have his whole world ripped out from under him the way Annika did. And he had a very fun last few minutes in the game. So his reaction was real, and that it showed how he felt about being able to play.
yes, but I do question so much of what he said in his exit press.
I don't question that it was his perception. Is that a good
Mm,
way to say it? I believe, and we will get to it, I believe he is telling the truth as he sees it.
And
I
that is fair.
yeah,
That is definitely fair.
I
It
just
was
think
very
there's
interesting.
yeah, I just think there are some things he is mistaken about that we will get to. And the
Yes.
way we will get to them is the same way we always do,
That's
following
right.
our path of comparing Rome's game to my rules for winning that I originally wrote way back after season one and have been updating ever since, using all the non spoiler information available to us from what we saw on TV, interviews, social media, and secret scenes. And of course, the newest version of the rules can be found at robhaswebsite.com/yxlostfeed and clicking on the link bubble for Survivor rules.
Mhm.
But before we address how Rome did in terms of rules, we always have some other things to discuss about the episode. Now, normally this season, this is where we would talk about Rome because we always had something to talk about with him. And, this is no exception because while the bulk of the podcast will be about him, there is still something related to him that I want to mention that isn't anything to do with the rules, and that is Jeff letting him take his spot at tribal council.
Oh, I
Uh,
thought you were just gonna say it was the Rome episode because it really
well,
was.
it was Survivor Rome. Um,
It
but
truly
yeah,
was.
some viewers and former players were very upset at this, while others thought it was fun. I fall into the fun group. I saw nothing wrong with this. It's, Jeff isn't the Pope. He's not, taking his spot on the pulpit or anything. And,
Mhm.
Jeff only did it because he knew Rome was headed out the door. Uh,
Well, and that's the thing I was wondering about too, if that was why there was, like, this it was almost like the last nail in the coffin, right? Because it was very clear throughout the whole episode that production and the editors, they're having a little bit of fun with Rome
mm,
at his expense, and so I'm
yes.
curious if that was just, like, the final we know that this is happening. Like he has said all of these things in his
Hmm.
confessionals and about how he was going to be, what was it, licking the bones of Saul or something. I mean, it
Something
was
like
just
that. Yeah.
very, very aggressive. Like, I am the mastermind. I have convinced 13 people to vote my
Hmm.
way. I am the best player at this game ever. And Jeff is just like,
Yeah.
over in the corner. And like, yes, Rome, please come and sit here and tell me why I'm wrong. And then I will snuff your torch.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and, even if Rome had picked up on it, that this was why it was happening, there the only thing he could have done at that point was play a shot in the dark. I mean, th
Yeah.
nothing was changing. He wasn't gonna turn the entire merge tribe
No,
against him at that point, or for him
no, he
at that
really
point.
wasn't.
Um
I just thought it was so funny how there were so many conversations where they would show him talking to someone
Mhm.
and then he would walk away and then someone would go, "Okay, so the real plan, it's
Yeah,
Rome, right?
yeah,
Oh, okay."
yeah,
Just like it was so funny that everyone was like placating him so much. They're like, "Oh,
yes.
yes. Oh, that's it's going to be Saul. Okay. All right. And everyone's
Mhm.
on board. All right, great." And then he like moves
Yeah.
on to the next one.
Oh, that's so terrible
Hilarious.
the way Saul treated you. Oh, yeah, we don't want someone like that in the
Right?
game. Yeah.
So awful, and then, oh, yeah, that's Rome. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
it was such an incredible episode, but I also have to say, as someone who is a former player, I'm a little
Mhm.
bit jealous that we don't all get our own exit episode, right? I mean, this whole episode was centered around Rome,
I
and
mean,
I
you kind of got an exit episode when you were saved. Like you got the episode of the
mm,
people saying, "Okay, it's going to be Jessica. It's going to be Jessica. It's going to be
right.
Jessica," and you going and questioning them, and them saying, "Oh no, no, it's not you. It's definitely not you," and then you being like, "Oh, okay," and then being saved. So you got like an exit episode when you weren't exiting.
All right, well, I guess I'll take that then, and then my exit was a very dramatic exit, so
Yeah,
I guess
yes.
I'll take that.
So
But
dramatic that it is emblazoned on our poster as, rule number 7. So,
it is, with the very sad fire.
yes. Yes, yes. So, all right, let's move on to a few other things that happened this episode, but
Sure.
I wanna stay with tribal council for the moment. Um, well, actually, you already talked about the amulet holder, so we can move on from that, because I was just gonna agree with what you said. So, going back
Yeah.
to earlier in the episode, um, I need to ask Sam. Sam, if you're listening, dude, how do you just ignore the strange buoy sitting there when you're looking for a challenge advantage?
Right? And I will say someone on Twitter asked, "Survivor players, have you ever just seen
Hmm.
a random buoy?" No. There was never a random buoy. There if there was any and ever anything that was random, you checked it immediately because you
Yeah.
were like, and even if it wasn't random, if it was something that like was provided to us, like a basket full of food, you checked the whole thing. You ripped it apart if you had to. Like if you see a buoy just floating there, you look for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if Asia or TK had seen it, they would have known from their initial journey. But well, after their initial journey, they,
You were there.
right. Now another question that I have for Sam, and I fully don't expect him to answer these, but unless he suddenly comes on to our recording here, just knows
Yes.
mentally, is why he was so ready to quickly put up Andy as the backup target, because that surprised me, as did
Mm,
Sierra not picking Andy to be on their merge team when it was down to Andy and Sue at the end, which we saw in a secret scene, and which I posted also as a YouTube short and TikTok. I just
mm,
cut out all the fluff and compressed it down so you could just see pick, pick, pick and see who goes the order. Um,
mhm.
Sam had spent so much time bringing Andy in and cultivating trust. I don't understand why he's so willing to toss that aside.
Yeah, and I do think that's an interesting point because it there was a pause at when Andy's name was suggested. And I'm curious if this is one of those circumstances where you're trying to hide the fact that you're close. And so he and Sierra opted with, oh yeah, no, Andy would be fine. And maybe they will pull Andy aside and say, listen, we knew that you weren't going to be going home. Like we knew that that wasn't going to happen. Of course, Andy's going to be frustrated because if the shot in the dark had been played and been successful, then Andy's going to
Right.
be going home. But I think that they could do damage control if it's expressed to him that way. That like we didn't want anyone to know how close we actually are, so we can hide this threesome. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the goal, if that's what they'll try to do. But I imagine that that was part of the reason for them being willing to offer him up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll have to see how it progresses from here.
Hmm.
Now, finally, at least from me, we will have a lot to say about Rome taking the information he got from Kyle and spreading it around.
Hmm.
But I want to add that when Kyle said, "I'm one of the biggest dumbasses here," I kind of was nodding along in agreement because he was not far off the mark. And I know some people are right now yelling at me, at
Mm.
this podcast because almost everyone likes Kyle. And okay, I do too. But come on, he never should have told Rome all those things anyway,
Yeah.
especially the way we saw Rome questioning him. Kyle should have realized he was being grilled for information. Why do you spill all the beans like that?
Well, but that's been happening this entire season. Everyone has diarrhea of the mouth. Every time they come to meet somebody new, they're like, "Oh my god, let me tell you everything." And then they're shocked when they get thrown under the bus or someone else finds out. I'm fascinated by this entire cast and their desire to share everything immediately. I I just don't understand it at all.
I don't understand. I especially don't understand when you're being questioned like that.
Well, right. The
It's
only
just,
one that we saw kind of push back was Saul when he was being kind of
yeah,
bombarded with
right.
questions, but it certainly didn't help ingratiate him, into the group or anything. But
Right.
yeah, this is a very strange phenomenon that we are seeing with so many of the survivors
Hmm.
just wanting to tell everybody everything.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you have anything or anyone else you want to discuss before we move on here?
Yeah, my girl Sue. Come on. There's an entire ocean surrounding you. Why are you using the water well every time you need to wash this goddamn idol of yours? Like,
Well,
stop it.
and I don't understand why she felt the need to. She's like, "Oh, they're going to come over here and search my bag."
Right. What? Oh, that doesn't happen. I just
Yeah.
want everyone to know, like, if anyone's searching your bag, it's when you're like being sneaky
Well,
and
and then she
it's
should have left the red paint because then she would have been able to catch someone if they searched her bag.
Well, right. There's so many reasons, just leave it alone. But like, why are you continuing to use the water well? I just don't there's an entire ocean, whole ocean. Lots of options, lots of places to go. Instead, you're sitting there like pouring your drinking water over this and you're getting paint everywhere. And then her reaction to it was just hilarious because it was so, I got busted and I have to be like feign shock, but I'm not very good at
Mm.
it. She's clearly not a good liar. But I was just stunned. I'm like, Sue, what are we doing? So that
You
was
know,
something that I just,
she's only 45.
you
So
know, those
maybe when she gets
45-year-olds,
right, maybe when she gets older and more mature, she will understand these things.
she'll learn. Oh
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. Although it was
And
funny
then
when Saul told her, "You look good. We look good for our ages," thinking she was 45. I'm like,
I
"You go,
she
Sue."
and all I know it's people will probably not get this, but every time I hear her say I'm 45,
Mhm.
I just think of the first season of Love is Blind when there was a contestant who I believe her name was Jessica, and she said, I'm 34, like all the time. And it was like it became like a big joke. So that's the only thing that goes through my mind every time. I'm 45. But anyway,
Well,
so that was my bit about Sue.
also, shout out to the commenter on the YouTube version of the podcast who said that they hadn't seen your season yet and therefore
Yes.
presumed that you were one of the millennials on Millennials
Thank you so
versus Gen
much for
X. So,
that.
yeah,
That
yes.
definitely makes me feel good. So I appreciate those comments. Thanks. So
All
yes.
right. Well, speaking of YouTube, there will be, of course, other things that I will be posting on my YouTube at David Bloomberg TV. So check those out. But before we get to how Rome did, we want to mention that the rules we're about to discuss come in a shorter
Mhm.
and much more colorful version in
Yes, they
poster
do.
form.
Yes.
So go to robhasawebsite.com/yxlostfeed, scroll down to the poster, click on it, order it, and it will be rushed to your house.
That's
Uh,
right. It will be.
and then you can keep on scrolling and click and order a poster on a t-shirt and the checklist on a t-shirt. So you can just, you can get everything. Buy early for the holidays. Don't wait for the holiday rush. Get it now and get it for yourself. Just, everything.
You can wear it, you can hang it up. It's great. It's good
You can
stuff.
wear the poster too if you want. It's just more difficult. I mean,
It is. But you could try. You could
yeah,
certainly
you can
try.
try. You can wear. We've talked about this, like those boards, like menu boards, or there's a word for it that suddenly escaped my brain because I'm 45. So
Oh my goodness.
yes,
Maybe I should sell some with red paint all over them.
ooh,
Special version.
special version. Yes, yes.
The red paint version. Oh goodness.
All right. Well, Rome said in his final words that he ruffled some feathers. And that
Mm.
went all the way back to the beginning, as even
Mhm.
his supposed ally Teeny said at one point that Rome would have been an easy first boot if he didn't have an idol. Instead, he was the first boot of the merge, as everybody at the merge feast immediately settled on him as the target, and then the people at the beach did as well. Was it for similar reasons? Could he have avoided it if he had just taken some of his own advice? At RHAP, we know Survivor, and we know why Rome lost. Now, the first and most important rule is to scheme and plot, and Rome seemed to understand this, though he handled it in different ways in his original tribe and then at the merge. His intent on his original tribe was to lock in with a core group and be loyal to them. And this is something I've been mentioning for a few weeks now, while other people have talked about him bringing chaos because they've confused some of his behavior with his strategy. But
Interesting.
yeah, but Rome talked to Gordon Holmes about it as well. And, it goes along with what we saw. He intended to be loyal, but there was a problem in that while he was loyal to them, they were not as loyal to him.
Mhm.
Obviously, we saw that when Keyshawn tried to get Rome voted out a couple weeks ago. But I think it mostly stems from Rome believing that he, Genevieve, Teeny, and Keyshawn had a solid four before Asia
Yeah.
even got back from her attempt to get supplies. I'm
Mhm.
sure the others told him that, and there was a lot of discussion of it, including even naming the alliance, as he discussed in the interviews. But that doesn't mean Keyshawn and Teeny were on board to the extent he thinks. So this goes to what I was talking about, where you were saying in his interviews, he said some things that maybe didn't make a lot of sense. I think to him, they did make sense. He believed that he was in this 4-person alliance. That's why he couldn't understand, for example, why Keyshawn would go against him.
Yeah.
That's why he couldn't understand why Teeny didn't alert him. If they were all
Mhm.
4 equals, why would Teeny go with Keyshawn instead of him? But allow me to quote myself, which you love, from Why
Do.
Keyshawn Lost, where I talked about Keyshawn and Teeny being, quote, in the middle of the 2 other duos, with him saying they had really great relationships with both. What we didn't know until his interviews was that he also had what he believed was a very solid alliance with Genevieve as well, such that he didn't consider himself and Teeny a duo, but rather the 2 of them and Genevieve a trio. And
Mm.
he further said that the plan to get rid of Rome as soon as he used the idol had been floated previously, and Genevieve appeared to be on board with it. Now, let's note those last 2 things. Keyshawn and Teeny were tight with Genevieve, but he didn't include Rome in that.
Right.
And of course, they planned to turn on Rome. So for Rome, it was a situation where you don't know what you don't know.
Well, right. And I think that this is also an incredible example of everyone is playing their own game.
Yes.
And so the decisions that Teeny is making, the decisions that Keyshawn is making, Genevieve is making, they are making the best decisions for themselves. And I think
As,
we can
to
definitely
their own beliefs. Yes.
right, to their own
Yeah.
beliefs, right.
Yeah.
I mean, Keyshawn thought that he was doing what was best for
Right.
him and his game, but unfortunately, it wasn't the best thing for Genevieve's game.
Mm-hmm.
And so Genevieve had to come in and say, "Oh, no, 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 this is not what we're doing." And I think that we saw that with Genevieve on this episode as well, because all of a sudden she was like okay with turning on Rome because she has utilized Rome for what she needed until she got here. Now she's willing to cut ties. And so I think that Rome just he forgot about the idea that just because you say that you're in a solid 4 doesn't mean everyone feels like this is a solid 4. They might have other plans, they might have
Right.
other people that they want to work with, which clearly is what happened here.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's really to his detriment to wanting to be so loyal and believing that everyone else would be as loyal as he was.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there were a couple other instances of Rome being outmaneuvered or out strategized. We saw the merge discussions. You referenced them earlier, where he thought he had convinced everyone to go along with him when
Mhm.
they were actually
Yes.
humoring him to keep him thinking they were on board. We saw
Mhm.
him going around to various people and all of them reassuring him while he said things like, you already quoted some of these. I think I might be a little bit of a mastermind right now. The fact there's 13 people in the game and I can corral this many people to vote my way, that must say a lot about how I'm playing the game.
Mm.
And it did say something a lot about how he was playing the game. But that something was that they fooled him.
Right. Right. And they did a great job fooling him, so much
Yes.
so that he really truly believed he was a mastermind and didn't use a shot in the dark.
Right. Right. With that, we can move to the second rule, which I think might be a little bit longer. It says not to scheme and plot too much and to keep your scheming secret. Just maybe a little tiny problem here for Rome.
Just a
Um,
little tiny one.
yeah, and but now to his credit, he knows it. He told Rob,
Mhm.
the biggest thing I should have done was be quiet when you hit the merge. And
Yeah.
he is absolutely right. He even
Mhm.
said it in a confessional that aired as part of an Entertainment Weekly secret scene regarding what he did when they all arrived on the beach together and Gabe read the sign about the hidden advantage. Rome said, I've seen enough Survivor to know that once this merge limbo hits, it's best to lay low and chill in the grass and just wait for your opportunity to strike.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then he further said that looking for the advantage would put a target on his back and make it look like he's playing really hard. Quote, I don't want people to feel like I'm playing hard. I want people to feel like I'm the go with the flow, happy go lucky guy that just has a really loud voice.
Yeah.
And all of those were really great thoughts. Really
Mhm.
great thoughts. The problem was he didn't listen to himself. Um,
Yeah.
he did that for the advantage hunt, but he didn't carry it through to other parts of the game because, as he further told Rob, it's hard for him to sit still and not do anything. Quote, that was my biggest flaw at the merge, just
Mm.
not being quiet and letting things happen. And he even talked about it in the pregame because remember, he said he planned to follow Sandra's anybody but me strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think he also referenced in his exit press how no one was really doing much once they got to the merge. Like it really
Mm-hmm.
didn't seem to be like a whole lot happening. And I feel like if you have that type of personality where you like, well, something needs to happen because no one's doing anything. And so it's more of that need to be, I want to lead, I want to be in charge. And even though it appears that nothing's happening, maybe that's the better way to go because then you don't shine the light on yourself. And unfortunately, he gave everyone a reason to say his
Yes.
name because he started running around saying someone else's name, and everyone went, "Oh, okay. So this is what we're doing." Yeah.
Yeah. What he didn't properly analyze, I'd say, is why were people just sitting around and not doing anything? Well,
Yes.
it's because nobody should be throwing out names until you know who's vulnerable, or else you're
Yeah.
setting yourself up for a potential problem. Because
Mhm.
as far as he knew, half of them were going to be immune because that's the way Murgatory had been done up until this point. So it was quite a risk to pick a target at that time. And yes, I know
Mhm.
Rob mentioned this in Know It Alls, but it was already in my notes before Rob mentioned it. So just great minds, that's all. But, you know, so yes, that's why people weren't saying anything. But he was
Mhm.
out there talking to Kyle, spreading information everywhere. And it was just too soon. He had just met a lot of these people. He
Mhm.
needed to get the lay of the land rather than diving right in and deciding who he wanted to work with and trust.
Yeah. Yeah, he was playing like what is that? Speed dating? That's really what he was doing. Was just trying I'm gonna try it all right away, real quick.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And
Uh,
unfortunately, he got dumped.
ouch. Uh,
Well,
I did say earlier he was undateable now. So, uh,
see, this is
sorry.
this is our
I don't.
theme
I
now.
don't make. I was going to say I don't make the rules. I make these rules. I don't make those rules. They were
That's
made
right,
by
right.
someone else. Um, Now, after Rome talked to Kyle, it seemed, based on the edit, like he passed along a mix of true and maybe stretched truth versions of what Kyle said.
Mhm.
Though Rome said in his interviews that it was all true and there was even more to it than we saw. But here's the thing. I'm not going to get into what was true, what wasn't true. Did Kyle say more? Is something more going to cut out? It doesn't matter. It does not matter because
Mhm.
how many times do we need to emphasize this is a game of perception?
Yes.
And the perception is that Kyle comes off as being very genuine,
Mhm.
while Rome does not.
No, he does not. Well,
Uh,
and also that's something that I feel like Rome also forgot about, right? Because he came into this merge saying all of the things that you've already said about how the best thing to do is to not say anything,
mhm,
lay in the grass, hide, whatever. All of those things are great ideas, except when you come into the merge being Rome, the people that have come into the merge with you know who Rome is. And so if they start talking to anyone, they're going to say, Rome is not normally like this. Like, this is not the Rome that we have interacted with. And they're going to make note of it. And I don't know what, if any, effect that would necessarily have on their game versus Rome's game. But I think that they have seen enough of Rome in challenges that
mhm.
any stories that were being relayed to them about Rome would probably have some truth to them just from what they observed when they were together. And I'm certain that when he was walking around Ponderosa pregame, people were picking up on the confidence level that he
Mhm.
had and how he would likely come across. And so I would imagine that that's also a problem for Rome is that if you have already expressed that part of yourself, then to come in and expect people to buy it if you're different, I don't know if it would work for Rome.
I don't know either, but he should have tried.
Oh, I'm
Um,
not saying he shouldn't have tried. I'm just saying that that's another
because
issue.
maybe I don't think Genevieve would have pointed him out. I don't even think Teeny would have pointed him out at that
Mm,
time. Saul might have, but
right.
if it was just Saul doing it and nobody else, then people might have just blown it off or found another target. We don't
Sure.
know who else might have blown up.
Sure.
Um, so Yeah, I mean, what it came down to was whatever Kyle may or may not have actually said, people were going to trust him more than Rome, especially people in Kyle's own tribe who have worked with him. Like Tiana said that what Kyle said makes no sense. We're working closely together. I
Mhm.
mean, even
Yeah.
Sue seemed more likely to believe Kyle than Rome, and she had wanted Kyle gone at one point.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So it also did hurt Rome's case that, in addition to that, Saul leapt onto this and
Mhm.
was used it to spread around that he was, Rome was a pot stirrer and could be lying, because
Right.
that was Saul's own experience with him as recently as last episode when he dumped a lot of information on Saul. And then Saul talked to Genevieve, who told him, no, a bunch of that was untrue, even though, this was another situation where actually what Rome had told him was true. Genevieve just didn't like the fact that Saul had, or that
Right. Right.
Rome had told him.
This is
Um,
why you have to stop telling everybody your secrets.
right.
Stop it.
So, so Rome simply was not seen as being trustworthy in these matters. Again, whether he was or wasn't doesn't matter.
Right.
Like I said, he told Saul the truth about Genevieve, but Saul believed Genevieve. He
Mhm.
told at least some of the truth about what Kyle said. People believed him.
Yeah.
And, as Kyle said at the merge feast, dude's a rat, man. You can't trust that bleep for nothing. And people believed him.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I find it so interesting when there is this bit of telephone that is going on, because everyone is going to put together their own versions of things. And so the fact that Rome has this contentious relationship with Saul, and then he hands Saul a gift by doing exactly what Saul has said he's been doing, and Saul has no love for Rome. He's not going to come to his defense. He's going to use this as an opportunity to go, oh, no, 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 no. That is exactly what Rome does. And let me share with you the experience that I've had with him. So Rome underestimated Saul's ability to do
Yes.
exactly what Rome was doing, but do it better, because he was flipping the script on Rome and making Rome seem like he's untrustworthy, because this is the relationship that he had with Rome. And so it's a very interesting dynamic to see happen, because Rome was doing exactly what Saul was doing, but Rome started it. And so Saul was like, reacting to it, right?
Right.
And so it feels different when it's in reaction as opposed to the person that's initiating it.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, I don't know if Rome realized how mad Saul still was at him, because remember
Oh,
last
I don't think he
episode,
knew at all.
because yeah, he dumped a lot of information on Saul,
Mhm.
and Saul reacted to it, at least to Rome's face, positively.
Mhm.
And he didn't,
No. Yep.
Rome didn't know that Saul then fact checked him with Genevieve.
Yeah. And I think
So
this goes back to Rome wanting people to be loyal as he is. And
right.
that's a big concern for Rome playing a game like this. You can't assume that everyone feels the same way you do and that everyone will respond the same way that you do. And I think that's exactly what happened with Saul. He thought because he half-heartedly apologized and tried to make things better between Saul, and that Saul responded positively, okay, I'm good with Saul. We're fine. And
Mhm.
but unfortunately, Saul was just playing Rome, because Saul was like, "No, I haven't forgotten about all the things that you did over
Right.
here, but I know this is a game for $1,000,000, so I'm going to pretend to be nice, and
Yes.
then I'm going to fact check you."
Yeah.
And I just think that Rome didn't expect other people to be doing that when he talked to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, from Rome's point of view, as he explained it in interviews, he figured if someone told him that another player wanted him out of the game, he would probably believe it. And, you know, I want to say that, like on Big Brother, we see something like that happen and it can work. I mean, the season that just ended, the winner, Chelsea, used that type of word twisting to manipulate people all season. But
Mhm.
she had built up trust to get to that point. Rome has not. Rome just
Right.
met some of these people.
Right.
And, meanwhile, as I said, Kyle did already have trust with some of those people and appears at least to be a more honest person than Rome to the others. So when the information was fact checked, Kyle ends up looking like the good guy. Rome ends on looking like the evil
Mhm.
villain spreading lies.
Right.
And again, this is the case whether Rome told everyone the absolute truth, a version of the truth, or all lies. It doesn't matter. It's
Right.
all perception after
Mhm.
most people knew him for less than 24 hours, and some of his own tribe mates spread their own opinions about him.
And that's the other part of this. It's not just Kyle going, "Hey, but this is what happened." It's
Hmm.
Saul going, "Hey, this is what he does." And
Right.
it's Genevieve going, "Hey, yeah, that's what things were." And so again, it's like mob think at that point, right? Even if it is true or not true, it doesn't matter because you have so many people that are coming forward going, "Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, that
Hmm.
sounds like this and that sounds like that." And so Rome really would have been better to just sit back and not say anything
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Now, since we've mentioned Rome's initial tribe mates a couple times, we should go back to earlier in the game and see how he did with them. Because, we've talked a little bit about that he intended to be a loyal player. But even with that, there were some problems. First, because of the way he handled some of those on the outside of his alliance, most notably Saul, because Saul was still there at the merge. Um,
Mm,
while some of this goes into Rule 5, and we'll talk about then, much of it was just the way he was treating Saul in terms of being overbearing from a game perspective,
mhm.
giving him the ultimatum slash threat, following
Yes.
him around, etc. And I know he said in interviews that the editing on that was wonky and he followed Saul after trying to get him to give up his shot in the dark. And I will say, looking at the close in those scenes, it does support what he said.
Mhm.
The clothes switch back and forth, and you're like, well, why was he wearing those clothes? Those two wearing those. Um,
Yes.
but even so, from Saul's point of view, that was clearly too much. Even Teeny said at one point that they knew Rome was doing it to protect their alliance, but still, and then Teeny gave that look to the camera. Um, and so, yeah.
Yes, and again, we have to remind everyone that when you get into a situation like the merge, everyone is looking for any reason to
Oh,
vote someone
yes.
out as long as it is not them, right?
Hmm.
And so if Rome is offering himself up in a way because he's starting conversations and other people are now starting conversations about him, he's just making it that much easier for everyone to come to a consensus because, oh, well, it's not me. And that's great.
Yes. Yes. Now, you did mention the Rome apology to Saul so they could proceed on the Kishan vote. And he said in an interview that it was more of a real apology than we saw.
Mm,
Um, but it's clear they never truly buried the hatchet. I
right.
suspect that's because after the mixed reward challenge that most of Lavo lost, Rome told Saul everything. We talked about this, including that Genevieve didn't want to work with him long term. And then he told Saul that they should target Teeny, but told Genevieve that Saul was the one who wanted to do that. So after being all about loyalty, Genevieve's perception upon hearing those things was that he was turning on her right after she saved him the previous night. Now, do I think he was
Mm-hmm.
turning on her? No. I think he wanted to still work with Genevieve. I think he would have still been loyal to Genevieve, but I think he was trying to give information to Saul to kind of make Saul feel like he was being honest with him.
Yeah.
Um, but as Genevieve said, the scales, they be tipping. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, these were the tribe mates that Rome headed into merge with.
Right. And I think if you're going to do something like that, and again, I realize everyone is playing their own game, but if Rome's whole shtick is I'm incredibly loyal, and if he wants to try to mend fences with Saul, and by doing so, share information, he maybe should have checked in with Genevieve first and said, "Hey, listen, we're gonna need Saul come
Mm-hmm.
merge, and I want to make him feel better. What do you think about me having a conversation with him about some things?" And then maybe he wouldn't have found himself in a circumstance
Right.
where Genevieve was then frustrated, and then Saul wants to throw Rome under the bus more so because of that. That's just something that maybe would have been a better game move for Rome to try to avoid the problems that came from that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we could go to the third rule, which tells players to be flexible. How do you think your winner pick did in terms of this rule?
I think he was very flexible because it was like, if you go against me, now I'm gonna just go against you. So he wanted to be locked in with the four,
Right.
right? They had their four cheese alliance or their four cheese pizza alliance.
Right.
So I think he wanted to be like, yes, this is it, and then realized, no, they're not as interested in this as I am, so I got to cut ties with them. So I think he was flexible in that regard, in a willingness to try something different. But I also feel like he struggled with changing those parts of himself that he needed to change in order to play the game better for other people's perceptions and what would work better with other people as opposed to just Rome. It was very, very Rome centered. And it was, I want this to be what Rome wants, and it's Rome's way or the highway. And so, in that regard, not flexible. But I think he tried to be in regards to who he would play the game with.
Yeah, I would say his flexibility was, I would describe it as iffy.
Mm,
In my opinion, like you mentioned, he talked about being locked in during the pre-merge, which almost led to him being blindsided if it hadn't been for Genevieve saving him.
right,
And then he had a plan at the merge for who he wanted to work with, and well, we already discussed that a fair amount in the second rule. Um,
right.
Now, of course, part of this rule is that you need to have your thumb on the pulse of what's going on in the tribe.
Hmm.
At the merge, Rome was very, very certain he knew, and indeed believed that not only did he have the pulse, that he was the beating heart causing that pulse. And even before then, he was certain he knew what was happening, even as everyone on his original tribe planned to blindside him before Genevieve
Right,
stepped in to flip things. So
right.
I really think this goes back to, like I said earlier about his interviews. He believed he knew what was going on in all these situations,
Mm,
and he really didn't. People just fooled him.
yeah, well, was Rome's way or no way.
Yes. Yes. All right. Well, the fourth rule tells players not to let their emotions control them. I think Rome could certainly react emotionally,
Mm,
as we saw a few times, especially in terms of how he treated people outside his alliance. But I think we have our answer to a question I'd asked a few podcasts ago, where I had said, did he choose his alliance based on emotional connection, or was the alliance picked first? And then he decided he didn't need to worry about those people outside of it. Because we
mhm.
talked in the first rule about how he believed his four-person alliance was set on day one. I think where his emotions got involved was in not realizing he had to still deal with the other two people in case he needed them in the future. Just like
Yes.
he needed Saul to have his back at the merge, or at least not lead the charge in trying to get rid of him.
Yes. And I again, I think this goes back to that loyalty component. Rome is assuming that everyone is going to be approaching the game the same way that
Right.
he is. So in his mind, he's thinking, okay, well, I'm locked in with these guys over here, so that's good. I don't need to worry about them. I can
Mhm.
go over here and I can deal with this. But you got to go back and you got to check in. You got to make sure that everything's still okay and that we're still on the same page, because if you don't, then Genevieve and Teeny are going to be looking at each other going, what on earth is Rome doing? What is happening? Because they don't know, because he's not telling them. And then I assumed we were good. No, you
Mhm.
know what they say about when you assume?
Ooh. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. No, I know. I think that takes us into the fifth rule, which reminds players they need to pretend to be nice and play the social game, because Rome could be a very nice guy when he was
yes.
on your side.
Mm-hmm.
But as we were just talking about, if he has no use for you, from what we saw, he didn't try too hard to hide his true feelings.
No, he really didn't.
Now it didn't matter for Asia because she was voted out. So uh, it didn't come back to bite him, and it wouldn't have mattered for Saul if Keyshawn would have stuck to the alliance Rome believed they had.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing. You can't predict the future on Survivor. You never
Right.
know when you might need someone's help.
Mm-hmm.
Rome should have done more pretending to be nice to Saul. But we even saw, going back to the beginning, there was a secret scene of Saul trying to be nice to Rome and warning him
Yes.
that other people were worried about him looking for an idol. And Rome got pissed off at him for saying it rather than at least pretending to be appreciative. Or I think he did pretend somewhat, but Saul often saw through Rome when Rome was trying to pretend. There were several
Yeah.
conversations where Rome was like, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's like this," and Rome is just like massive eye roll city.
I mean, I think
Um,
Rome heard that conversation and responded to it differently than Saul wanted him to. I
right.
think Rome was just very suspicious. Like, why is he even telling me this? Does he
Hmm.
think I don't know what I'm doing? And so he got his back up a little bit because
Yeah.
instead of him thinking through the permutations, like, oh, well, maybe Saul's telling me this because he wants to work with me. Maybe Saul really is looking out for me. Instead, it was immediate, like, well, he doesn't think I know what I'm doing, and I
Yeah.
that's not okay. Like, he can't tell me how to play this game. And so if you don't keep that part of you in check either, you're going to misread a situation because that was really like Saul, like, kind of offering up like an olive
Hmm.
branch, right? Like, "Hey, just, you gotta keep it down a little bit." Again, I think Rome is very much like Rome centered, and Rome has a read on a situation, and there's really not much give there if it's not to his benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing was, in the original tribe, it wasn't just Saul who was upset about these things. And I know Rome felt like he was in good with everyone, but we saw almost all of his original tribe talking
Mhm.
negatively about his overall attitude and ego and bragging and talking and everything, such that it put him outside the main social circle.
Right.
I know he and Asia clearly did not get along at all. But as she told Mike Bloom in her interview, when Rome was gone on his journey, do you know how much we got done at camp? We were moving, we were cooking, we were being productive. We built a swing, we were having a great time, laughs, giggles. Vibes were great when this man was not at camp. It's just
Hmm.
like, I understand he's excited. We're playing Survivor. We're excited. But he was just overconfident, so overbearing. Now, from Rome's perspective, he told Mike Bloom he knew Asia and Saul weren't happy with him. Quote, but when it came to Teeny and Keyshawn, they were very nice out there on the island. They never made it seem like they were annoyed with me. Now, the word seem is doing a lot of work in that quote
Yes.
because they were better at pretending to be nice. You
Mhm.
know, Teeny told us Rome is a nuisance around camp and stresses us out. Genevieve said Rome is such a big personality and does rub people the wrong way. In the pregame, Rome told Mike Bloom his superpower would be his social game. But while I think he would be a really fun guy to hang out with,
Mm. Mhm.
as Teeny said multiple times, being with him 24/7 in this game situation was just too much.
Yes, and he did say that his Achilles heel was overconfidence. So, I think that that's the other component of this that was affecting Rome is just and it's great to be confident. Please be
Mhm.
confident. But you have to also recognize how you are interacting with the people around you and how they are perceiving you and reacting to how you are being. So I do think that it was certainly something that he needed to work on
Yeah. Yeah.
just a bit.
Yeah. All right, well, we can go to the sixth rule, which warns against being too much of a threat. Rome told Dalton Ross he was shocked people wanted him out because he thought he was more of an asset to people than a hindrance, and they would want to use him as a shield. The thing is that in a way, they did use him as a shield against being the first person out at Merge by
Mm,
painting
oh,
him as a bigger target. They just
mhm.
put him up there. Oh, I don't still have my shield that I used to have over here. They just
Oh,
put up the shield and they held him
mhm.
up, and he got all those arrows that they were shooting.
Yeah.
So yes, they did use you as a shield.
And I thought it was interesting because in his pregame press, he said he was the one of the biggest threats to win this game. And then when he was talking about looking at the people who were in the merge, he put himself up there with Sam and Tiana as the biggest threats for challenges and that we were going to be a force to be reckoned with. And
As long as there was no
Kyle was
puzzle.
right, exactly, no puzzle. So the 4 of them were going to take all of the immunity challenges, which I thought was fascinating because he's also openly admitted he sucked at puzzles, which you've already
Yes.
talked about. So we all know that Survivor loves puzzles, and a lot of the immunity challenges might include puzzles. So if you want to be a challenge beast, you have to be able to do puzzles. And so I just, again, it's that overconfidence. I
Hmm.
could do everything, even if I suck at it. I can still do it. Like, and I'm going to beat everyone. So just, I thought that was fascinating that he really perceived himself in such a way that he was going to be like a challenge beast and he was going to be a threat. And it's great, again, to have that confidence, but you also have to be mindful of how that's going to be seen by the people
Right.
who are around you.
Right. And obviously, he was and has been a threat to at least one player, and that was Saul. And we
Mm-hmm.
already talked about Saul doing, going to work to undermine what Rome was saying.
Yeah.
But by spreading the stuff about Kyle that he did, Rome, of course, became a direct threat to Kyle as well. And since
Mm-hmm.
people, we discussed it, people believed Kyle rather than Rome, that made
Right.
him an overall liability. Because as
Mm-hmm.
I say in this rule, another way to be a threat is if you are so untrustworthy that people don't know which way you will vote. You may be perceived as a threat to them sticking around. With
Mm-hmm.
Rome, it wasn't just about how he would vote, but what would he say and who would he say it to? If
Right.
if he could tell Tiana that Kyle was targeting her while Tiana believed they were tight, what else might he do in situations where maybe they didn't have as much information? Add that to his own original tribe mates talking about what he did and what he said to them, and he was perceived as just too chaotic a piece to stay on the game board.
Yeah. Unfortunate for you,
It's like
Rome.
having it's like having, playing chess and having a piece that can randomly jump over here or over there or something.
Well, right. And you really do have to be so mindful of everyone else that's in your space, regardless of what your game entails. And that was, again, something that Rome was not recognizing that his actions are going to negatively affect Genevieve if people believe that he and
Mhm.
Genevieve are together. Same with Teeny. And if he's the person that everyone is looking at and he's the person who's causing the issues, he's not the person you want to tie yourself
Right.
to and try to get through the game with if everyone is worried about how he's going to vote and his loyalty and what he's going to do and what's he going to say next. Even though I think in Rome's mind he thought, well, I'm being truly loyal because I'm trying to look out for everyone, they just don't know that I am. It's a very mixed perception that you were
Mhm.
putting out there for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, the seventh rule covers idols and advantages in game mechanics. And obviously, we saw Rome find the idol on his original tribe, but the way it was portrayed made it seem like he was trying to be secretive while everyone else was suspicious of him. He said
Mm,
in interviews, however, that the other three he believed were in his alliance were all in on it. Now, let's presume that was the case. It does somewhat soften the way, he was rather obvious about it because he felt he had an alliance already, and it didn't really matter what the other two thought, as we
mhm.
previously discussed. Of course, again, it comes back to his perception of his situation there.
Right. Well,
What?
and I think that that would also help us understand why he wasn't, like, shocked and appalled when he came upon Teeny and
Yes.
Keyshawn looking at the idol box, because if they were that close, then, "Oh, yeah, great, go ahead, you can all
Yeah.
look at the box because we're all together," and I think that's supporting what he's presenting.
Right. I agree. And what really mattered was in relation to that. When he did find it, he told Teeny, he
Yeah,
showed Teeny where the box was, saying he trusted Teeny 1,000,000% or something like that. And despite what Rome had thought, Teeny said they had planned to vote out Rome, but now they couldn't. So it turned out that Rome sharing his idol information and advantage information with Teeny did solidify any alliance, at least for the time being. And it also showed how tight Teeny and Keyshawn indeed felt they were at the time with Genevieve, as Keyshawn had discussed in his interviews, because they could have easily just shifted the target to her, but Keyshawn and Teeny didn't want to. They came up with that lie, that story that they told Asia about,
right.
oh, well, he said he might use it on her, which no, they
Mhm.
just wanted to protect Genevieve.
Right, right. Mhm.
Now, Rome also got the vote steal from the journey he went on and used that to help take out Keyshawn when Keyshawn had tried to blindside him. Did he technically need it? No. But it helped make everything secure, ensured Keyshawn couldn't even play a shot in the dark, and
Mhm.
theoretically made Saul feel better. Plus, him using it meant he couldn't be seen as someone with an advantage when you get to the merge and therefore putting a target on you.
Yes, and I will say that that particular move was very enjoyable for all of those reasons because it
Right.
did check all of the boxes. Did he need it? No, but did it do all of these things? Yes. And so I do think that that decision from a game perspective was
Hmm.
a perfect decision for him to do.
Yeah. Now, you had mentioned earlier, well, actually, I had and you had his shot in the dark. Now, he told Mike Bloom that he considered using it in this tribal council because he believed there was about a 25% chance he could be a target. But he decided against it because even if it hit, it would only save him the one time and everyone would clearly have wanted him out. Now, I both agree and disagree, presuming we're taking his interview at face value here.
Sure.
I agree he shouldn't have used it if he thought there was only a 25% chance of him being the target because, mostly he believed he was the one leading the charge and corralling the votes. So it would have looked very strange to others if he had then turned around and used the shot in the dark, if indeed he had been right about the way the votes were going.
Right, right.
People would have been like, wait, you got us to vote this way. Why are you playing your shot in the dark? Um,
He could have
but
played it off, been like,
yeah,
"I wanted to show you that I'm that trustworthy and I
yes,
don't have my shot in the dark moving forward. So you don't need
yeah,
to worry about me anymore, right?" Wink. Yeah.
yeah. But I disagree with the reasoning saying, well, it only keeps you safe for one vote, so there's no point in using it. Because we have seen many times that staying safe for just one day can indeed
Mhm.
turn everything around. Now, it didn't for Caleb. I understand that. But
Right.
you never know when someone might do or say something to put themselves in the spotlight, or if
Mhm.
you might win immunity the next time, or there could be some sort of twist that ends up helping you, which it looks like there's
Mhm.
going to be next episode. So you just you never know. Anytime if you're certain, again, or have a good feeling about it, you should try to save yourself. Never resign yourself and say, it's only going to save me for 1 week anyway.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it would have been the better option if you and he also did say that when you're not hearing another name, then you might be that name. Ding, ding,
Hmm.
ding. Yes, and if that's what you were thinking, then that is all the more reason to play the shot in the dark just to avoid that being a potential issue.
Yes. All right. Well, Appendix A is next up here, and we can talk about it because it is about the players keeping their end goals in mind when voting. And, it normally goes vote out the weak, then the strong, then the weak, then the strong. But the merge vote in the new era is a situation where we frequently see the so called easy votes.
Mhm.
And there may never has been as easy an easy merge vote as this one.
Mhm.
Because not only did the other players see and hear what Rome was doing, but even his own original tribe mates, not only did they not try to pour water on it, they poured gasoline on it.
Yeah.
As the appendix notes, it's no surprise if the actual merge vote is someone who is more of an easier consensus pick to kind of ease into the merge. In many
Mm.
ways, it's like the very first vote of the season when people are just happy if it's not them.
Right.
With so many people to choose from, and one person standing out for playing too hard and spreading stories and doing all the other things we talked about, it was an easy decision.
Yes. And I also would like to note here just for Rome's perspective or from his
Hmm.
perspective that he wanted to vote out Saul because he knew Saul didn't like him and so he didn't want Saul on the jury because he wasn't going to vote for him if he was in the final 3, which I
Yeah.
thought was an interesting little side.
I mean, it's something we see it more often, I think, in Big Brother. We
Mhm.
see it occasionally in Survivor, but I think more often in Big Brother, people will start talking about, well, I don't want that person in the jury. They'll never vote for me to
Right,
win,
right,
or they'll
right.
vote emotionally instead of strategically, and I don't want that, or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. With that, it is about time to wrap things up. What are your final thoughts on Rome?
Oh, Rome, you were my rock. Here you are. And unfortunately, just like my other rock that I chose, it was the wrong one. So, with that, Rome, I'm sad to see you go because you were my winner pick, and I was hoping maybe the tides had turned. Maybe the rock gods were going to look down on me and say, you know what, this girl deserves a win with a rock. We're going to give her this one. But no,
No.
apparently there are no rock gods looking out for me at this time either. Rome came in with so much confidence and really wanted to play this game with gusto. I have to say, I'm very impressed that he was able to pull off watching all of the seasons of Survivor within a very, very short amount of time. And I was a little concerned that maybe there would be too much going on in his brain about Survivor because he didn't have enough time to marinate on it. And I do think that that is a key component to being successful in this game. You have to watch the seasons, you have to understand what's happening, you need to read all of the things that are being provided to you and watch all the podcasts like this one to truly understand what the game is and how it works. You can't just cram it all in and then expect to understand it. It was like he was cramming for a test,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't do any of the review. He just he did read all the materials. And so I was worried, and I think that's maybe what happened here is that there was just so much in his mind when it came to playing the game that he thought it was going to be fast and quick and furious, and I just got to get in there and I got to do it without understanding that sometimes things take time and patience and just a little bit of quiet, and you can play Survivor that way too. Unfortunately, he didn't, and Rome frustrated some people, so much so that he found himself being the merge boot. So, Rome, thank you for entertaining us, though. You did really entertain people. You created a lot of fodder, a lot of discussion, a lot of tweets, and a lot of imagery and comments. So, thank you for that, for putting yourself out there. We truly appreciate it. And you got to sit in Jeff's seat. I'm jealous.
Yeah.
So, that's great.
Yeah, I'll have some similar thoughts to you as well. But you know, starting where you ended there, Rome had an incredible Survivor experience in the time
Yes.
where he was there. He found and played an idol. He went on a journey to get and then play an advantage. He survived a blindside attempt thanks to his ally. He was the first
Hmm.
player to sit in Jeff's seat at Tribal Council. He was either incredibly entertaining or annoying to viewers, depending on who you asked. Sometimes both. And he got a ton of TV time for both good and not so good reasons. In his
Hmm.
final words, I would say he was right that he was very entertaining, but he was also right that he ruffled some feathers. The first part is not what we focus on here. The last part is because it definitely played into him getting voted out. Rome ruffled feathers in a few different ways, both socially and strategically. From the social side, he didn't seem to fully consider that those outside his initial tribal alliance might still be of use to him. So he treated them as if they weren't important. When Saul made it to the merge, he had a big incentive to help turn the tables against Rome. And even those he counted as allies felt that he was just too much for a lot of the time, and they certainly didn't put up a fight. But he might have been able to survive the initial merge vote if he had just kept his head down and let someone else screw up and get the attention. As we mentioned, he told Rob his biggest flaw was not being quiet and letting things happen at the merge as he knew he should. Rob Rome told Dalton Ross, all I can do is look back and say, okay, did I play as hard as I could? Did I have as much fun as I could? And did I leave it all out there on the floor? And I like to say, if you didn't play hard, you didn't play at all. Well, he did play hard. But as we said when Keyshawn lost, he played too hard. He knew he shouldn't have played that hard. He wanted to be like Sandra and go with an anyone but me strategy, but he couldn't help himself. As you mentioned, remember, everyone, that Rome discovered Survivor and binged it in just a few months. We've said before, just about 2 minutes ago, that one concern we have with people who binge watch all the Survivor seasons in such a short time frame is that there isn't as much time for them to digest all the implications of what happened. Now, to his credit, Rome went beyond that and dove into commentary like podcasts and Reddit. But even so, I do think there were some missing pieces, like a full understanding of your own point of view versus the point of view and perceptions of other players. I think Rome would be fun to have back on the show after he's had some more time to digest all of this. Watch the show in real time, realize that he was looking at things one way while others viewed them from a completely different perspective. We say it all the time. Perception is everything.
Mhm.
Rome had one idea of what he was doing and how he was acting, but didn't realize that almost everyone else had a different idea entirely. Even when he felt he was being loyal and doing things to make people trust him, others saw other aspects to his personality and felt the opposite. But most importantly, Rome needed to listen to himself and slow down. Playing hard can be fun, but as they say, it means you're there for a good time, not a long time. In the end, Rome played Survivor like he watched Survivor. Fast! And that is why Rome lost.
Yes, very good analogy there. Oh,
Oh,
Rome.
yes. Well, before we get to our predictions for next episode, I do want to just remind everyone that the rules we just discussed are available in poster form, poster on a t-shirt form,
That's
and
right.
checklist form by going to robhasawebsite.com/whylostfeed.
Yes, and am I talking about how people can find
Yes.
us? All right, excellent. I always forget the order of things sometimes. So I am at Jessica Lewis 89 on Twitter, and I am also at Jessica Lewis 6789 on Instagram. I do live tweet during the episodes, and I do have a great time doing that. But
And she's
I
always
do
behind me as usual, you know.
listen, I've learned why that is, ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you what I just learned about Mr. David Bloomberg here. He tweets from his computer
Yeah.
during the episodes.
Well, yeah. You have any
I'm
idea how fast I type?
fascinated. Well, but and then you were like, "And this is why I beat you all the
Yeah.
time."
Yeah.
So, now that answer is solved, but my mind is blown that you would be tweeting from your computer. I'm just I don't know.
I don't know why that blows your mind so much, but yes, I during live tweeting, I tweet from my computer and I also take notes at the same time, which makes it, it's a lot easier to do that on the computer than on the phone.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That is definitely a fair point. I didn't envision it that way. And so now that answer has come to be in existence because
Mhm.
David Bloomberg not only tweets from his computer, he also has a lot of social media content. So much so that here is a page that was created by Mr. David Bloomberg at linktree.com,
Linktree,
right?
yes.
Yes. Mhm.
Yes, so you can find all my various accounts at linktree/David Bloomberg with a dot before the EE in that URL. Or you can find me at other places too. Big Brother 26 is over, obviously, and therefore my double duty Why Blank Lost podcasting is done as well. But I'm still co hosting the Tradar podcast for the Traders Canada Season 2. That's TRAIDAR if you want to search for that. Or you could find me directly on Twitter and Blue Sky as at David Bloomberg, on Threads as at David Bloomberg TV. And that's also my handle at David Bloomberg TV for YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, where I've been posting. Well, since Big Brother ended, I have to admit, I can't post like 4 videos every day anymore. So it's 3 or sometimes
Shocking.
2 per day. I mentioned last week I passed 40,000 subscribers on YouTube. So I encourage people to join the fun and subscribe over there. And, I'm posting clips from Survivor, The Traders Canada, The Summit, and House of Villains, among other things.
You do so much. It's kind of crazy.
It's my full-time job.
It is. Since you're retired, look at
Yes.
you.
Yes.
You're just taking over. I love it. It's so good for you. No,
Uh,
I think it's fascinating, like, the relationship that I've now developed with you throughout the years because,
yeah,
God, we've been doing this together a long time, haven't we? And
we
I
have. I
I
realized I was reminded on LinkedIn of all places that I started on RHAP doing this podcast originally with Rob about 9 years and a week ago.
wow.
And so we did it for a little while. So that means you and I have been doing it for probably what, 7 and a half, something like that.
Well, it had to have been it was right after 2016 when I
Yeah.
was on the show. So then I would have started probably 2017. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Long time. But it's been so much fun. It's been great.
Yes.
But I just love that it's changed so much because when we first started, you were so opposed to like any video type of thing happening.
Mhm.
And now look at you. Not only do you do this, but you do all of the TikToks and you're constantly like putting yourself out there. I love it. I think it's great.
Well, good. Good. All right. You know what else we think is great? Predictions.
No, we
Oh, we
don't.
don't think that's great. Okay.
No.
I will go ahead here. The preview again didn't give us much, except that Andy apparently wants to flip on his tribe. Now, who knows if that's true? But
Yeah.
if it is, I can't blame him, since we talked about it earlier. He may well find out that Sam was perfectly okay with him being the backup target. Plus, of
Right.
course, that secret scene where Sierra didn't pick him to be on that
Mm-hmm.
merge team. Um, so I think that has to make him wonder about trust in that regard. Still,
Right.
the thing is, Andy is playing the game in a way that he wants to be someone who is scooped up, not someone who is
Mm.
trying to take a leadership role. So even if
Mm-hmm.
he does want to flip on them, I don't know that he'll have the opportunity. Um, especially with the comments Rome made in interviews about how well Sam appears to already have integrated with people on the various other tribes.
Yeah. I'm curious if Andy will try it and realize it's going nowhere fast and maybe just realize he's got to just stay where he is. And I
Yeah.
am also curious how Sam and Sierra are going to respond because I'm certain Andy is going to approach them and call them out on it. And
Yeah.
hopefully they'll have a good answer for him.
Yes. So I think things will go in a different direction. I just don't really know what that direction will be.
Mm,
I suppose it would make the most sense if it's Andy himself, since he was the backup vote. But I still think he'll be around for a while. So my mind keeps going back to Tiana for a few reasons. One, Gabe and Sue were mad at her for throwing Gabe under the bus in the mixed up group reward a couple weeks ago.
mm-hmm.
Two, Sue believes that Tiana knows about the paint immunity idol. Three, even though everyone took Kyle's side over Rome this week, the statements Rome spread are still hanging out there. And
Right.
sometimes, even if they don't hit immediately, people are like, well, maybe he did have a point.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to make that my prediction. I think Tiana is next.
I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm looking at
Okay.
my little cheat sheet here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm trying to determine who has people who are kind of on their side. Now, I would agree that Tiana doesn't necessarily have people who are on her side, and she was who I thought was potentially going to be the merge boot. But I'm going back to Rachel because Rachel really is kind of on her own in a
Mm-hmm.
strange way because she's not in with Andy or Sam or Sierra. And I don't know if she's going to try to make inroads somewhere, but I don't know how well it's going to work for her considering I don't think Sam or Sierra are going to go to bat for her. I don't know. I'm going to go with Rachel.
Okay. Now, after I had put together my predictions, I saw from Jeff Pittman on Twitter that CBS put out a press release about the next episode. And in that press release, it suggests that half the players will be immune. So that means all they
Mm.
did was postpone that bad twist from the Mergatory episode to the episode after the merge.
Now I'm frustrated.
Yes. And that's exactly what Jeff and I were talking about on Twitter. It's like, as Jeff said, something to the effect of, do they hate getting praise? We're all like, wow, this was a
Apparently,
great idea. And they're like, nope, we're going to do it again.
we're just
Um,
going to save it one episode.
yeah, I don't know that impacts our predictions because you can't predict who will be in
Right.
that group.
Right. Right.
But it could also explain like why Andy doesn't end up getting targeted because maybe he's on that group.
Right.
So we'll just have to see what happens there.
Listen, Jeff, we've already told you we really loved the fact that it was basically a merge. Can we just let it be a normal
Yes.
merge, please?
Yes.
Please.
No,
So
no, you
ridiculous.
cannot.
Anyway,
Um,
Oh,
All right. Well,
goodness.
as we wrap up, I do want to encourage people to check out the RHAP patron program at robhaswebsite.com/patron. You can get access to all the special podcasts that are put out just for patrons, plus Facebook groups and Discord. So you could support shows like ours and everything on the network by going to robhaswebsite.com/patron. And make sure you're subscribed to all of the RHAP Survivor podcasts by going to the newly updated website, weknowsurvivor.com. It's right there at the bottom of our screen.
Mhm.
You can see everything there. You can select your podcast service of choice, and you'll get a ton of great Survivor content like us, the Know-It-Alls, the B&B, Survivor International, the different check-ins, everything, all at weknowsurvivor.com.
Yes, and we would like to thank everyone who is at RHAP, including Scott St. Pierre and Jessica Sterling, for all of the producing and editing that you do, not only for Why Blank Lost, but all of the incredible content that you just heard David Bloomberg speak of. There are so many options available. We have such a great team and a staff that's been put together, providing all of this incredible content to you. And it really is amazing how much work goes into all of the production that you see. It looks like it's really like, here it is, but there's so much work behind the scenes. Even this pretty little, like, backdrop that we have,
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole thing. Like, it's incredible. So thank you so much to everyone for all the work that you do. Thank you, David Bloomberg, again for a special episode. And I feel like, even though my winner pick is gone, I'm just gonna put this guy up here because you know what, Jeff, you got to start listening to us, okay? Please, can you? Can you stop all of the madness?
Stop
Just
the
stop.
madness.
We
Yeah.
don't need all of this extra. Let the players just play the game. They will surprise you because they'll be really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you as always, Jessica. Yeah, this was, kind of a weird week for me. It was the, post wedding slowdown. I mean, we did one after the wedding
Mhm. Yeah.
earlier last week, but this is, everybody's gone. Things are going back to normal. It's kind of like really strange for me here. And it's just the two of us. And then next week, as far as I know, it'll just be the two of us, and then we'll have a couple of
I
guests
know.
as we pick up
So
again
crazy.
later. We just had to kind of take that break for things to shake out.
Yeah.
Uh, so so yeah, thank you as always, and we will be back here in 1 week. So we will see you then. Bye.
Bye.